right. All right, everybody, here we are. Welcome to Mission Critical Podcast, episode 2, Deuce. It is Thursday, the 27th of April, after just a long kick in the ass day. I hope your day was way better than the day either one of us had, but and maybe we'll tell you a little story. But hey, I'm one of your hosts. I'm Mark, and then this guy over here somewhere. Yep. That's Jeremy, aka Redbeard. Jeremy, tell everybody hi and a little bit about yourself real quickly. But we've already done some of it, so we know the deal.
Yep. Yeah, so basically, short rundown about me. I like to tactically LARP. I'm that dirty civilian that likes a lot of tactical training and guns. I went to school for gunsmithing. I have kind of a constitutional scholar background. And I stay fit, dude. Like, that's all I'm saying. Just stay fit or die or whatever, you know.
Or,
like,
yeah, or die.
Hey,
I just realized something as we go forward. And boys and girls, you're watching, like, again, we're not trying to be podcasters. We're not trying to be, we're just two guys, right? And but we have some views. We're both, I don't know if you want to call it pissed off. Like, I think I'm more incredibly saddened than I am pissed off. But But Jeremy, I think the one thing we need to do is not let any of that stuff get in the way. And as we go forward, we got to start off. I hate to say it this way, but we need to have like a kind of structured intro and throw the title out. So here, without further ado, you've seen Jeremy before, his background. You've seen me before, my background. And if you're new to the channel, go watch episode 1. I'm actually going to get some of the videos that we did together over on Centerline Systems. Over on Mission Critical Podcast as well. And you can go watch the Declaration of Intent or Handling Classified Information. And that is a good segue, because what we're going to do in this podcast is we're going to revisit not the handling classified information, although I would strongly encourage, and again, we'll get that up over on this channel too, but right now you can see it over on Centerline Systems. Matter of fact, if I'm smart enough, and if I've got the energy here at the end of the day, I'll put a link in this and in the info for this video. I'll put a link to that video as well. But we're going to talk about censorship here tonight. And and I know there's some things that are going on in recent events that somebody might say, oh, that's why they're talking about it. Well, we're going to brush on that, but that's not really the issue. And I think we're going to try to lay out the following type of argument, because a conversation about censorship, we could sit and talk for 10 hours easily and not even cover all the bases. So what we're going to do here, and Jeremy and I were just figuring it out, is like, how do we keep this to an hour? And that's the other thing going forward. We're really going to try to keep these podcasts to an hour. So we're already at almost 3 minutes. So moving on here, briskly moving on. We're going to talk about censorship, because I think the argument that I want to make, or that I'm going to try to lay out, is that we're in a new era of warfare. You can call it 3rd generation, 4th generation warfare. You do your own thing, but information warfare has been around forever. So, I mean, that's a different perspective there. But we're going to talk about that because we're in a new era of warfare. I mean, there's still kinetic warfare, right? There's still, bombs, guns, guys killing each other. That still exists. But, this isn't trench warfare. This isn't biplanes. This isn't like, brute force combat of the Battle of Kursk or, or Midway, things like that. Information has become, as humanity has evolved, as we've become more technologically savvy. Matter of fact, Jeremy, I'm going to do a quick aside. We'll have to talk about that later. Did we become more technologically savvy after Roswell? And as a result of, so, okay, let's table that one though. I just want to I could talk about UFOs, but hey, but
that's a cryptid conversation for another time.
Yep. All right. So, but here we go. And then I'm going to bring this Jeremy. So here's the argument I think we're going to try to lay out here for you guys tonight. Is censorship, information warfare. This isn't new. It's been going on for a long time. So instead of having this big 10-hour long conversation, I think the focus here is going to, some of it will be anecdotal. Some of it will be subjective. Some of it will be very objective, but it's like, my argument would be that since the Obama era, and it's actually, of course, right now somebody's saying, well, this was going on way before Obama. I concur wholeheartedly, but I'm just trying to say is that the use of censorship as a tool of war, right? Because warfare is still politics, right? I mean, without getting into all that kind of philosophical conversation, Clausewitz, blah, 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 blah. But that it was that era up to where we are now, where one side realized they were in a battle and realized that the other side were just stupid and were always trying to be nice and polite and, would open the door, even though the guy outside of the door has a sign that says, I'm here to kill you. And I've got a gun in my hand or a rock to do it with. Right. So this has been going on. And so we're just going to try to use some historical examples to illustrate this. Then we're going to talk about, well, who's doing this? Okay, well, Mark, you're saying this, but who's doing it? What do you mean? And we'll kind of break that down, and that's going to bring us back at the end of this conversation, which will kind of tie this in to the how the storage of classified information, or who has access to classified information, and then again how this is, you hear the term lawfare, but this is information warfare, and censorship is the main. I don't know, Jeremy, it's the main weapons platform. Yeah. Perhaps maybe is the good way to say it. It's the main weapons platform that's being utilized right now in a war that there is a war waging.
And I would say that it's probably as it relates to anybody, it's probably the most accessible means of warfare, because anybody can use to some degree a level of censorship or way of manipulating the narrative in whatever is advantageous for them. So it's quite frankly probably one of the most accessible forms of warfare in the information warfare spectrum. So I would say it's probably not only the most accessible, but at times the most potent. Bullets do a lot, bombs do a lot, but at the same time, you can destroy a person's life overnight with information, right? So to me, it's probably one of the most important and overlooked aspects of warfare.
Well, so again, to your point, you already said this. So I'm going to say this in a slightly different way. It's the most dominant platform, the weapon. I am speaking in terms of weapons platforms, right?
Yep.
These are devices that are intentionally being used to achieve a political aim, and what most people consider war. That's all it is, right? It's an extension of politics, right? So this is just another tool in the toolbox in the war fighters, armory, so to speak. And to your point, look, I mean, it's a no-brainer. This is more prevalent than, everybody wants to talk about well, how many guns there are in America. It pales in comparison to all of this stuff right here, whether you want to consider it a weapons platform or ammunition, dude, it's everywhere. It is so prevalent and everyone's doing it. And that's because we're all reliant upon this. Everybody has become a victim to this black screen, right? And, I'll just shut up here in a second, but this is why I want to do this is, I guess I'm part of the problem here because we're using technology, but just because it's a car or an AR or whatever, that doesn't mean it's evil. It's just it's a hunk of metal. This isn't evil. This isn't AI. This is just an inanimate object, a technology that we as humans should be able to use to either our advantage or our detriment.
Right. Yeah. And it's amazing how, it's such an easy thing to use too. It's not even like it's really that hard. I mean, you could do a lot of basic things regardless of regardless of your age. I mean, think about it. You have 4-year-olds, 2, 3, 4-year-olds that can manipulate a phone better than some people. And it's all it really takes is, as with anything, time, right? So if you give a child time, they will figure out how to manipulate, make calls, do things, send messages, and the thing of it. So a good example of that is my niece, when she was super young. I mean, she would open stuff up. She would take pictures. She would do everything, within a very short amount of time. And now it's to a point to where she's 6 and she's out functioning most grown adults that I know. And it's even again, I also know older people that know how to do certain things electronically better than people in either my age or younger. And it's if you dedicate enough time or you spend enough time using a platform or a device or whatever, the sky's the limit. There really is no limit to what you're able to do. So
Well, and there's a lot of people out there who are serious about this space.
Yeah,
And as a result, they
100%.
take the time to figure out all the nuances of like, well, what is this setting and how do I do this? And do
Yep.
tags really work? Or, to include like, I want to release this or post this at a certain time of day because that's going to reach a certain target audience. Or how do I work within the algorithm? How do I, so, and I'm here to tell you, boys and girls, that's not me, because I'm pretty much burning the candle at both ends, right? We weren't sure we were even going to do this video today, but then it was just like, no, we got to do this, man. I mean, so again.
Uh-oh. I lost you there, Mark. Uh-oh. I lost you.
Hour out of our day, because this matters, and share some information with you. So Jeremy,
your side freezed up on me for like about 20 seconds.
Oh man, well there's we'll see. Censorship. Yeah. Well, could you still hear me?
No, I couldn't hear anything. I couldn't see anything. I was like, uh-oh. Like,
all right. Well, boys and girls, if there's a pause, well, that's just because this is a low production facility. This we don't have any corporate sponsors besides Centerline Systems, and that company doesn't have the millions of dollars we need to get this going.
To be fair, though, we say we don't have any corporate sponsors, but I think it's unfair to the NSA guy that sits there and listens to everything everybody does. Technically, they're our biggest sponsors. And when I say our biggest sponsors, I would say they're America's biggest sponsors because they listen to everything.
Hey, let's go ahead and let's raise our glasses to those people violating our constitutional rights. Here's to you guys. Cheers, motherfuckers. Cheers. Oh, yeah, I promised I was going to try not to swear in these, but those guys deserve it. So.
And the thing, I wonder if they sleep at night. Some maybe do.
Like either upside down hanging from their cave or inside of a coffin, Hey, moving on. But so going back to this, so Jeremy made a great point, right? Technology, it's a great tool, but it is widespread, right? It is diffused throughout the system, if you think about it. And then the other great point Jeremy said is that, unlike certain weapons platforms, like, maybe there's a great platform. So for example, a Benelli M4, a shotgun, that semi-automatic shotgun, it is an awesome platform. I really love it. However, there's certain little nuances to it that you have to train. So hypothetically, if it's a zombie apocalypse, grid down type of scenario, and if I had the Benelli and anything, I'll just take a Remington, right? Or Mossberg, whatever, any traditional pump shotgun. And I had this person I haven't worked with, I haven't trained with, I don't know your capabilities. I'm going to give you the pump shotgun, the pump action before I give you the Benelli, because if you don't cycle and function the Benelli properly, you'll never get into the battery. It won't cycle. There's all kinds of things. Jeremy knows I'm kind of threw that out there for you because I knew that'd get your gunsmithing, one.
No, and you're not wrong, because it's like, when it comes to the use of things, like, especially like you're talking about the Benelli and in a pump shotgun, like a Mossberg 500 or whatever. And this does tie into things, but the reality of it is like, just with like firearms, there is also the same factor in technology, which is a human induced malfunction.
Yeah.
And so, it's like, it's all about doing the reps and figuring out how to properly do stuff. And, if you don't load the shotgun, or you don't cock the shotgun or cycle the action appropriately, it's going to be a human induced malfunction. If you don't do the same thing, with the semi-auto, human induced malfunction.
But so before we let's not go too far into the gun analogies, but to your point,
it's the same thing with technology.
And I just want to bring that back in, because this is the premise to our whole argument, and you did a great job. And so again, boys and girls, we talked before we started shooting this, but what Jeremy brought up wasn't part of the conversation. And I guess maybe we're kind of beating this horse to death here, but that's exactly it. And the analogy we're trying to use here is, we could sit and have fun with this and talk about different types of handguns, single, all of these things. But the point is, this technology, these mediums, to Jeremy's point, his cousin or your niece or whatever you said, what some people can do with a phone now, but by and large, The vast majority of us can do this right here.
Yes.
You can
Yep.
plug in a camera. You can get on your laptop or your desktop or your phone and
Yep.
do this same thing. So the recognizability of this technology means it is pervasive in the system, right? The environment. And
Right.
so therefore, again, it's like, well, hey, anyone can use this and everyone is using it. So therefore, you might think of it like, I might say, like, well, it's like a cheap, Chinese AK or something like that, but
Yep.
that's not necessarily the right analogy. The bottom line is everyone can use it and it's reliable unless you're being censored, right? So
Yep.
that's kind of a long-winded segue to get into this. We've all
Yep.
become dependent upon this tech, and
Yep.
this is our new public square. Matter of
Right.
fact, I don't want to sidetrack it, but I could sit and talk about, Section 230 and the public square and how I'm just incredibly disappointed. Matter of fact, let's just I'll keep it short, but let's use this into a segue. So technology is the tool that we all use. It's everybody has technology in their hip pocket. Everybody needs, and some people really do need it to survive,
Yeah.
but so many people are reliant on technology and it's in your hip pocket. So if I can control technology and if I can censor how people are using this new public square, I'm now suddenly advantage me in in warfare. And boys and girls, we are in a war right now. I mean, we'll see if we have time for this during the conversation. We've been in a war for over 10 years.
Yeah.
But most people are only just now looking around them and realizing what's been going on. But that's why I kind of just, and it actually precedes the Obama era, but I'm just using that because that's what's still going to stick in most people's recent memory. So, Jeremy.
Yeah. So like, and when you evaluate censorship too, like, I think a lot of people think about the more contemporary examples, which would be, like Twitter or YouTube or Facebook or whatever it is. They're very populist at the front at the moment type things. But we can't also forget is, like you brought up, there are some historical things that we should take points on. And I would say that even things like, just manipulating the narrative about certain things is to a certain degree a form of censorship because you're only showing people what you want them to see as opposed to what they should see or what they need to see in order to gather the bigger picture. And I think
it's a lie by omission.
Yeah. And so to tie into that, I think there's also a certain realm to where propaganda fits in that, to where, again, you're not getting the whole side of it, and especially it's a mechanism used in warfare to where like like the 1940s like depictions of Japanese, right? Like John Basilone said, oh, you're expecting this bucktooth Jap, and it's like, no, like that's not the kid. Like you were sending guys expecting this cartoon character and they would get stomped because they're like, holy shit, this is not the guy. This is not the guy in the picture. But they did that because they wanted you to feel superior to your enemy, even though that wasn't the case. So they were censoring they censored the reality of a lot of World War II because it wasn't popular to begin with to go into World War II, but they didn't want it to become even less popular than it already was. So in order to keep that war machine running, they used propaganda. So there's a lot of forms of censorship, but I mean, those are just a couple nuanced examples.
Well, so again, not scripted, but a great point. And I'm going to sidetrack us just a little bit because, when it comes into PSYOPs, psychological operations, information warfare, right? This is the war we're in right now. And to Jeremy's point, look at what's going on right now. It is necessary to create the other, the them, the evil people. Look, everything is ultra, what is it? Ultra mega. It sounds like a awesome beer to me, but ultra mega and all these things. It's like, and you see this being happen. So, there's two sides to the coin. And maybe the coin isn't censorship. Maybe the coin is propaganda. And maybe the two sides to that coin is censorship. And then the other side is the propaganda or the disinformation, type of thing. Because going back into what you just said, for World War II, it was necessary to create the evil boogeyman, right? And so like this is the one thing I'll gladly have a conversation with anyone on. Like, yeah, America is racist, but we're nowhere near. You want to see real racism,
Well,
go to another country, anywhere else in the world. But that, you know, but yes, of course we have our horrible moments in history. And
yeah,
Jeremy just hit on one that, you know, I'll gladly like stand up and say, yeah, we really fucked up, and that was not a good
yeah,
moment for us. And that
yeah,
was the internment of Americans who were of Japanese
100%.
ethnicity. Yeah,
Yep.
I mean, yeah. So,
And Chinese people got caught up in
yep,
that too,
yep,
because at that point in American history, all of them looked the same, right? And that's and which we right, all of
yep,
them. That
yep,
was
yep.
the verbiage of the time. And it's like it, you know, I think not to sidetrack, but because this is I want to have a whole podcast on this because it needs to be talked about a lot more than it is. But in the end of the day, like that was a big deal because yeah, like you said, like that was a racially like motivated type of thing. And we can only hope that from that time that we can find ourselves as being, you know, better than that, you know, and it's but if
So
you
time
want
out
to
right there. Time out right
yeah,
there. Sorry. But if we have censorship and
yep,
disinformation, and if we control this public square,
yep,
and people aren't able to have this free flowing, this arena where ideas can flow
right,
freely and be exchanged, well, then how will we ever overcome that? How can we ever be better? How can we ever learn from that?
exactly,
We can't even sit here and have a conversation, you know, about like, well, what's happening here? Like, okay, I mean, boys and girls, if you think we kind of got fixated on the things that, you know,
hmm,
motivate us, you know, weapons, warfare, history, but, you know, just look at your history of just the last 3 years. Look at how
yeah,
we created a them. Anyone who didn't agree with what the thing was or what the government said that you should do,
right,
you know, look, there was people calling for people to be arrested, thrown in
yep,
jail, ostracized, left to die, you know, and evil, vile words were
right,
being said. That's all part of psychological warfare. That is part of the other side of, you know, their censorship. So, you know, look, I mean, a quick side story,
yeah,
just getting all of this stuff set up, Twitter account, YouTube. It's
hmm,
stupid. I know this is going to sound horrible, but like it took me like 3 times to get this YouTube account set up. And then we did a video and it wouldn't let me do the video because then it said I had to go do something else. Like, and I already have a channel over on Centerline Systems. So it's not like this is the first time I've done this. I'm like, what the hell? Our Twitter account. Hey, Elon, if
yeah,
you're watching this or if somebody watches this who knows Elon, or maybe we'll do a tweet on this, you know, but like
yeah,
we set up our Twitter account. All we did was set it up and we were immediately locked out
yeah,
of our account. I just
yeah,
got the account reinstated at the end of the day yesterday.
yeah,
Like and the excuse is all bullshit. Like, oh, hey, we made a mistake. We thought you were you know what? I'm like, how? I mean, you got a name, you got a phone number, you got emails. Like, you know, no. So this
yeah,
is what's going on. But you know, no, okay. Look, in all fairness, yeah, I mean, large companies working on technology, of course, I mean,
mhm,
because it's technology, it's going to fail. Yeah, okay. But think about the odds, the probability that these two idiots right here, who, by the way, have some really nice beards, but these two idiots are setting up a channel, you know, and I'll go back and maybe, Jeremy, did I mention this in the previous video that the declaration of intent got yanked from YouTube and then I had to challenge it and then they're like,
yeah,
oh, we made a
yeah,
mistake. We're sorry. But by then it's too late. They already busted you
yeah,
out of the algorithm, right? So
yep,
these are the tools. These are the platforms by which this war is being waged. And so, you know, Jeremy, I just wanted to throw that in there because
yeah,
we're already experiencing that. And we haven't even shit. The first video isn't even up for people to view yet. And we've already
right.
been crushed and repressed.
Well, I'm going to use I'm going to use props to depict a form of censorship, right?
Hey, hang on a second, because I mean this serious. I don't know what you're about to do. I think I
Yeah,
do, but those images could get us censored right then and there too.
yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah, yeah.
What
No,
it
so hang on. Don't show it. Just so everybody hears the noise.
yeah.
No,
So it
no. Stop. I mean this seriously. I don't think you
yeah,
should show it. I
yeah,
think but if everybody hears the noise of what you're doing, they'll understand what you were intending on maybe
yeah.
illustrating.
So I'll explain it because there's no way of like making the proper noise, but
Well, no,
like
you already did. Just insert it and eject it.
yeah. So
Everybody
basically,
who knows what the hell do you just did.
yeah.
Yeah.
And it was a really shoddy example too.
Yeah.
But the point being is you would have individuals and this is kind of going into the two-way situation, but you literally have oh my God. Okay, I'll bring it up after, but you you would literally have individuals that would tell you that a 50 BMG is going to fit in an AR-15 because that's their depiction of what a 5.56 looks like. And it fits. As a certified gunsmith, I can assure you that unless you have a magazine that fits the 50 BMG, it will not fit the 50 BMG no matter how hard you want it to. It's but that's the perception they put out there, albeit people like me exist and any person that's, well, I shouldn't say any person that's ever served, because we know how that also goes too when you get
Yep.
officers that speak on weapon systems.
Or, I mean, look,
but
let's just be honest. The vast majority of infantrymen, I mean, like everybody has a very, and the same with law enforcement. Oh,
it's
and that actually, see, we're sidetracking ourselves, but that goes into the dirty civilian.
yeah, well,
concept.
and
Yep.
so like as somebody who literally like grew up with this stuff, went to school for it, they would have you believe that a 50 BMG is the same thing as a 5.56. It is patently not. But in terms of censorship, they would try to turn off and censor any opinion to the contrary because it does not support their narrative. So censorship is a weapon that more often than not is used to support a narrative, which historically is a narrative that is patently false or shrouded so much in untruth or half-truth that it could be basically disproven within a handful of examples. So,
and that sorry, but that begs the question. I'll just throw this over to you. So then why is it so hard? Because I'm kind of setting you up here a little bit. But then so why doesn't it happen? If we can disprove things, I mean, just think about the recent madness and think about the recent events, having to do with laptops and documents, and sniffles and sneezes. Like, well, okay, these things can be disproved. I mean, like, these are objective facts. Here they are. But no one wanted. You see what where I'm trying to feed you? I'm trying to, okay.
And I think it comes from that. I think it kind of comes also from that idea too of the individual's dependency on where their information comes from. So like we have been told from the start as children, like these are the examples of authority that you trust. And I wholeheartedly blame the school system, because we have this hierarchy, which even when I was going through school, like you listen to your teachers know best. And in that hierarchy, they were separating children from their parents already, to the point to where we will tell you what to think. You need to memorize this, you need to memorize this, you need to memorize that. And if you stray outside of it, your grades are going to suffer for thinking for yourself. That hands down, like, and I'm a 90s kid, right? Like it was already getting to that point, albeit not as bad as children have it now, but it's undeniable the fact that public education also is a mechanism, or a vehicle rather, for censorship. Because if they can get you from a young age, they don't need to convince you as an adult, because they've already captured you for the most part. So I would almost think of it as like a passive censorship at that point, to where you're already believing the lie. Therefore, they don't need to censor you because you'll censor yourself. So I guess that's kind of what I have to say to that point. But
well, before you go any further, because I want to add one thing to it, but then you had a nice segue there that goes into, for us to try to stay on track, to going in, well, who is censored? I mean, everybody knows what censorship is. Now, if you're watching this video and you're like, oh, that's not censorship, or that's not this, well, then, Hans, are we the baddies? That might be you in that meme right there, like asking that question. But, but to your point, Jeremy, you're talking about, education. Well, it is one of so again, you're not just fighting a modern or even an old, any battle in the history of warfare, and to include probably what future space battles will look like, are going to have multiple elements, and they're going to work on multiple degrees, multiple layers, multiple facets. And, and in this war that we're in right now, education And the controlling, as Jeremy just pointed out, the controlling of minds, that's propaganda, right? That's disinformation, that's censorship.
Right.
All of these are, again, tools in that toolkit that are being used. And to Jeremy's point, I mean, like, well, there it is right there. I mean, and it's not just also corrupting the child and indoctrinating a child into this. It's also the facet of what you said, Jeremy, which is we have to get rid of the individual, right? We got to have, there can't be family, there can't be community, there can't be church. There's got to be you and you alone. And we are the only ones who understand you. We, of course, being, the government, the people will take care of you. And then, Jeremy, my final point to what you said there, and which I loved, is because the other, side of the coin, or the other tool in the toolbox is, and if you oppose it, if you're a parent and you show up at a school board meeting and your mic is shut off, or you're arrested, or you're told to, leave
or you get put on a list.
Yeah, exactly. And then the next thing you know, the FBI's investigating you and you're being labeled a domestic terrorist. So this is all by design, boys and girls. I mean, I know right now, and I am going to make a hat and I'll put some tinfoil on it. I know somebody's like, oh, it's tinfoil hat shit. I'm like, no, it's not. I would argue that your inability to see what I'm saying, and again, we could spend 10 hours. Go do your own research. There's so much evidence out there. Not a single thing I said is false right there. I mean, there are so many examples. So Jeremy, I'm bringing it back to you. I started sidetracking on the examples. The point here is we're talking, kind of larger, the larger picture kind of perspective here. But Jeremy, I think what you just said about education, because to me that ties in, well, who is practicing censorship? Who are the individuals who, I don't want to label them enemies, because I'm not labeling individuals. We're talking in broader strokes here, right? But Jeremy, education, hands down, where so much censorship is taking place in this country, at both sides, censorship, 100%, disinformation, and actual, sometimes physical, and because a physical attack, I'm not talking Mike Tyson kicking your teeth in, but if a law enforcement officer tells you need to leave, you're being arrested. That is the threat of force. The force is the government's going to arrest you, right?
So to that point, and this is probably controversial to some, but probably makes sense to others. At that point, though, do we not set ourselves up for the dichotomy of terrorism, where the definition of terrorism is to use force in order to basically achieve political gains? So if you're going to remove somebody, though, through force, and it's the state removing you through force, regardless of how that force is, in order to cement their point of view, not only is it censorship, but it's censorship by intimidation, which by the American standard of how terrorism is, are you not at that point threatening somebody with the removal or use of force to remove you to suppress their point of view? So it's like only tyrants do that. Only those who would pursue, a tactic of terror, which is intimidation. And it's like, why at this point, why at this juncture do we not evaluate it as what it is? You had parents that were speaking about, I think it was the Rona, and I think some of the drag show stuff, and a lot of the adult books and stuff like that ending up in schools in their opposition to it. Why did those people end up on watch lists?
Correct.
The only reason, and this is where censorship and the state really meld together, and this is why I kind of appeal to the idea of going to that definition of terrorism, because if you're not doing it for political reasons, if you're not doing it to secure political power or gains, then what are you doing it for? If you're not afraid of these people, then why are you forcefully removing them and threatening them via the state? You don't do that if you're actually just in what you're doing as a government. You do that when you're unjust and tyrannical as a government to suppress the opinions and the voices of others in order to support your own predetermined narrative. And so not only is it a mixture of censorship, but I would say that it's censorship with the threat of terrorism, because you're terrorizing these families regardless of how you want to look at it, you are threatening their livelihoods. You're threatening to take their children away from them. That's not a just government. So if we're going to, and perhaps maybe I'm wrong on this, but that is not what is conducive of a just government, regardless of a constitutional republic. We're just talking general just government. A just government does not have to do that. So, I mean, what say you, Mark?
Well, I think that's going to actually have to be another podcast. I
Yeah.
don't know if you can tell I'm actually thinking. So this isn't a look at me, pat myself on the back moment for anyone who's watching this. If you're, we're 35 minutes into it, but just a little kind of disclaimer background. So I actually have a master's degree in international security, and my focus was on nuclear and biological chemical terrorism. Jeremy already knows this, right?
Yep.
He's known me for a while. I went off and did this for real. Like, that was my job, although it wasn't as sexy as somebody might think it is. Right. But, at the end of the day, terrorism in the war on terror, that is a part of it. And that's probably why I got hired at the agency. But then subsequently or recently, I do maybe once a year, sometimes it's once every other, it kind of depends, but I've taught a class on terrorism to law enforcement officers, 5 times now in the last, 5 or 6 years, maybe, something like that. But so Jeremy, to your point, when you were saying that, my knee-jerk reaction was like, well, hang on a second, they're defining terrorism. There's, it's kind of difficult to do. And there are a lot of different organizations, entities, scholars have their own definitions.
Comes in many forms.
Yeah. But so all I'm trying to say by that, look at me, here's my, my pedigree, is I'm just trying to say, like, I actually very, very seriously studied this and lived it for a long period of my life. And I like what you just said, because I think we should do that in a different episode, because because you're not untrue. You're not wrong, in what you're saying. And matter of fact, I think if we actually really sat and looked at it from that lens, like, hey, okay, here's an agreed upon term. Like, so I would actually argue too, there's 3 different forms of terrorism, right? And we're not going to go down this rabbit hole, but state sponsored terrorism is one of them, right? And that can mean a couple different things. And in this case, in the way you're describing it, is the state using the violence or the threat of violence against its own citizenry. But what you've just described is, whether we want to have an intellectual, theoretical argument about if that's what's really happening. But at the end of the day, boy, doesn't it feel like that? I mean, to your point, like, no, hey, you need to shut up, or you're going to be removed from this town board meeting, or you're going to be arrested. It's like, oh, hang on, or we shut off your mic because you're being vulgar. Like, I'm being vulgar. I'm reading from the book that you guys have put in my 6-year-old's fucking library. So if it's too vulgar for us as adults to read or listen to, then why is my kid being subjected to it? And my ability to speak out against this and try to say, hey, this is wrong, this has got to be removed. And your response, as Jeremy pointed out, the state, is to threaten me with, again, censorship, and, not just, and that can come in many ways. Like, you'll never be back in this town meeting, or the sheriff or the cop is going to, remove you. And if you don't go willingly, you're going to be arrested. And that goes into another aspect, as you pointed out, Jeremy, of terrorism. Like, there has to be the use or the threat of force to bring about some type of change. Sometimes it's not political data, but those are the nuances. But so that was a great point right there. And I would ask everybody right now at 38 minutes, hit pause, rewind that, and let that digest. This is totally unscripted. We're eating up time talking about this right now, but it's a great point.
It's valid though.
Yeah. And that, but it falls under this larger umbrella or the rubric of what we're talking about: censorship, information warfare, psyops. These are all tools. They're part and parcel of the same, I was going to say sandwich. I don't know. I guess I'm fucking hungry. And there's 4 deer out in the field, about 175. They just came running from south to north. And every time I see a deer,
I had your squirrel moment there, did you?
Well, no, I actually just, whenever I see a deer, I think of food. I'm like, because I like how they taste. I'm like, oh, I could eat you right now. Boy, that backstrap would be really good.
Right.
Yeah, I got this little soy sauce marinade thing I do with backstraps. Buddy. All right. But anyway, back on track. Jeremy is right. Squirrel. In this case, it was a bunch of deer, but right. So education is just one. And I already see, because I think boys and girls, just bear with us. We're going to get better at this. And, but we really do want to try to keep these at about an hour, and we're already at almost 40 minutes. So we're going to kind of like not move through quickly, but we're just maybe not going to go in as much detail as we would have liked to have otherwise. But so far, here's the argument. We are in a new form of warfare. A war is being conducted, whether you want to agree with it or whether you want to admit it. Maybe you don't want to look around you and see what's happening every day, right? But there clearly is a struggle. There's some kind of sea change. There's something is amiss. Something's not right. I would argue that we've entered into a new form of warfare. I think Jeremy concurs with that. And Jeremy's talking about how all of this information warfare, and that's how that we decided to do it tonight. This is the topic. These are the tools. This is the new weapons platform that's being used. It doesn't have to kill you. It just has to get you to shut up or be afraid of talking. Or if you do speak out, like Tucker Carlson. Well, here, so this will be the segue. So who's conducting, who are the evil parties here? Who are the baddies, if we want to use a meme? Well, I would say AOC and every politician who is called out, to include our government, non-elected officials, individuals in the Pentagon, like saying, oh, these people shouldn't be on social media platforms, or I'm glad Tucker Carlson's been removed, or AOC, where they're weird. Like, do you guys not realize that you live in a constitutional republic? We have a Declaration of Independence. The First Amendment is the bedrock of that declaration. And you guys are like clapping and all joyous that people are being censored. You want people to be censored. And Jeremy, this is where I'm going to turn it over to you. It's not why, who's being censored and why? What do you think, Jeremy? As a matter of fact, and for everybody watching, there's the question. Who's being censored and why? Hit pause right now, formulate your own opinion there, and then hit play, and let's hear what Jeremy has to say.
Yeah, so I think it's one of those things, right, to where it's kind of a very broad spectrum, because as we were talking about earlier, Mark, the left does it to the right does it to the left, and then there's people in the middle that are censored by both, because both don't want them part of their arguments, because they kind of pick out points of both sides. So I don't honestly, like, nobody's safe at this point. And what I think is interesting is when you take somebody like Tucker, whether you agree with him, disagree with him, like him, don't like him, in the end of the day, when you have somebody or like an organization such as like Fox News, which is like the bedrock of like a lot of Republicans, right? Like, whatever, for
unknown reasons, because
I mean, look, if that's your bag, so be it. Look, it's not my thing. It's probably not Mark's thing. But
no bueno.
Yeah. So like, and the same thing for CNN. So like, in all of these other organizations, right? But in the end of the day, what I think is interesting is Fox News tolerated and allowed Tucker to go forth and do a lot of, he got away with a lot of stuff, and Tucker Carlson would even admit that. But there got to a point to where they were like, look, like, they probably sat down in their meetings and were like, look, he's going to undermine the crap out of us, and he's going to destroy. I think he actually mentioned that, like, there was the potential that they feared that he was going to destroy, like, the, Republicans running for election coming up. And because of the fact that Trump, namedly, because Tucker was critical of Trump, he was critical of a lot of different things that he had done. And Fox did not necessarily like that, because Fox was on the Trump bandwagon for a long time. So when you have, and that's one situation, but Tucker also was very anti-war. He was not for the war in Ukraine. That was a huge spat that he had with Fox News, if people remember, but that happened quite a while ago, and he had gotten in hot water about that, like, oh, like, you're not supporting the war in Ukraine and blah, 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 blah. And he's like, but why? So I think it was numerous events for him, as it is for many people, that they're like, nope, we can't have you saying this because it's not going to support our side. And the irony about this whole thing is, when you look at something in terms of censorship, like the war in Ukraine, Mark, I don't know about you, but don't you find it kind of ironic how hawkish the left is about wanting to be in Ukraine, where it's supposed to be the Republicans instead? And that's not to say there aren't Republicans, but the left is very invested in going to war in Ukraine. They would send our sons and daughters to the destruction with an atomic bomb if they knew it was going to get them some type of gain. But there again, another situation in which when you look at censorship and anybody that reports honestly about something like Ukraine, you rarely ever hear about it in the United States. You look at Judge Napolitano, he has numerous different guests. I like his show because he has everybody that from people that are opposed to it to people that are actually fighting over there on the Ukrainian side. He has mixed views. His show would never fly on Fox News. Never, because he allows two separate ideologies to come in, provide information for you to make up your own decision. And that in and of itself would be dangerous to the idea of what the narrative is. So you want to talk about censorship. I think the war in Ukraine is a fantastic example because there's a lot we don't see in the West over here about the realities of what's going on. Much like I'm sure that censorship to some degree is taken part in places like Russia, right? Where they don't want people to see that. So it's not necessarily one person or one group over the other. I think it's literally you have these feuding factions trying to vie for the opinions and hearts and minds of people. And somewhere in the middle, you have these people that are just getting overcome by like all of these sides. And it's quite childish if you think about it, because a lot of it you can see right through. It's pretty, like, they make it obvious. It's not like they try and hide it anymore at this juncture. So I guess that's my long-winded way of saying, like, nobody is incapable of being a victim or on the serving end of censorship. And I think to some degree we all kind of use it because of the fact that there's, you're not going to keep a person on your own personal profile that says bad things about your wife and daughter, right? Like, or your son, or whatever the case might be. Like, you're not going to want to have to deal with that person, right? Like, so what's your natural course of action? You're going to be like, nope, I don't need your opinions on here because that ain't kosher. So to some degree, we take part in it, but I think that there are also definitely forms that are far more malicious, yes, in to some degrees than others. I think when it comes to that, like if we go to censorship, when it comes to like, hey, like, I don't need to see like this stuff you're saying about my wife and daughter or whatever the case is. There's not a place here for it, right? And some people do that. They filter out the people that can or can't say things, which is fine. But then when you start getting to things that impact the lives of Americans, and more importantly, their liberties and their rights, that's where it starts to have some of that malicious intent, I would say.
Well, and therein lies the problem, though, Jeremy. I mean, I'm not saying I'm not claiming that your statement is incorrect. I'm just saying to me, you highlighted the real issue. Jeremy and Mark having a pissing contest on social media about whose beard is better. Like, that's that, and then if Jeremy just wants to block me from his, his Facebook, I like to watch cat videos platform. Well, okay. No harm, no foul. That's Jeremy, because maybe I am being an asshole. Maybe I'm like, whatever. But when Jeremy is the government or the media or law enforcement or a school board, an education system, and instead of like filtering somebody out, like, hey, dude, all you're doing is ad hominem. You're just attacking me because I'm old, I'm bald, I'm white, I'm black. Well, we don't like, okay, that's one, but that's not what is going on, in my opinion, Jeremy. Like, and so I like what you said. So again, I'm not disagreeing with you. I mean, that's true, but I don't think that captures what we're, it does capture it. But I guess what I'm kind of saying is like, but that same analogy, that same how you manage it, that you're just bringing out, that was a very, in my opinion, very individually based opinion. But what we're talking about is structure. We're talking about who runs the internet, who runs the media platforms, who runs our education, who's in charge, who controls law and order in our city, or quote unquote law and order in our city, who are the lawmakers passing the laws, hey, look, I'm going to come right out and say it right now. So here's censorship. Hunter Biden. Like, I'm waiting. You know what, Jeremy, we're going to have to do this video again too. I mean, we're almost at 50 minutes and we're not even touching on half the things but like, I want to have a video and I'm going to list out, I'm waiting. I don't want an apology because apologies are meaningless. I want people held accountable. People have straight up used this technology and used their positions of power. So I guess that's where I agree with what you're saying. Like, you know, I stupidly brought it into the individual level, but on that micro and macro level, what we're seeing is those who have the power are abusing it because they don't want to hear what Jeremy
100%.
has to say. Like, oh, you're criticizing me because I'm exposing your 6-year-old to books about, you know, an adult male getting a blowjob from a teenager. I mean, that's wrong on so many levels. I mean, that's a criminal event. Why aren't people going to jail for this stuff? But instead, the school board shuts you down. It doesn't even give you a chance to actually express yourself. And therein lies the difference. And I know what you're saying, but I think I may have focused a little bit too much on that. You know, who cares about the online spats? Now, I will say this though, last thing.
Yeah.
If you want to call it our side, because I don't know if I'm necessarily on a side, you know, I do believe in freedom, period. I guess I'm on the side of freedom. You don't have to agree with me. You don't have to like me. And I'll support your ability to speak out. And matter of fact, I would encourage you, you know, like, especially if you're like, hey, and you just proved me wrong and I learned and you helped me grow and be a better human being. That is what America stands for. That is why we're so unique, because we can have that discourse and it is supposed to make us better. E pluribus unum. Out of many, we are one, right? So you're going to get that. It's always going to be messy. Families are messy. America's a family. And if you believe in freedom, you're part of the family too. But so, you know, I kind of sidetracking this there and I'll shut up. But I think it's really more of, my point is, we can have these squabbles at the individual level. And a lot of people and this is what I was trying to say on our side, they'll spend more time attacking you because you misspoke about something one time in your life, or you don't like the right type of weapons platform, you know, like how we give each other shit, you know, like, you know, we spend more time attacking each other as opposed to like, hey, why aren't we talking about the issues that you and I are talking about? Why aren't we actually focusing on how do school boards have so much power? How does a governor who doesn't pass any type of legal structure have the power to tell you what you can and cannot do with your life? You know, you don't see what I'm saying? That's the censorship. That's the information war psyops that I'm, you know.
Well, and I would even say to further the point of, you know, if we're going to examine governments or agencies or whatever the case is in terms of censorship, then the only place that or I should say one of the most prominent places that we can look is censorship that is used to shield criminals from any form of justice. So, you know, if you, again, you've already spoken to this point, but to further the point of like, okay, well, you know, let's look at Epstein, right? Like, let's examine that whole thing. Why? We have the list. We have the list and nobody's talking about it. You know, nobody of any form of authority is talking about this list. They're censoring these. They're not only censoring the list, they are censoring and shielding the people on that list, and there's nothing happening. So, you know, I made this, and I'm going to fit this in here. There's so many people that want to, you know, that freak out. And I understand why. When it comes to mass shootings or mass homicide, whatever, when it comes to those types of events, they're like, save our kids. I don't see anybody saving our fucking kids when we're hiding a bunch of elite pedophiles when we have the fucking list. But instead we're too caught up in our squabbles to where we can't even uncensor the fucking list. This is my opinion. Send a fucking strike team to the island and deal with the motherfuckers. We know where they are. And to many people,
or more to the point, Jeremy. The people who are withholding this data are the people that we supposedly elected to office.
And in my opinion,
to your point, and I'm trying not to just fucking start laughing here because we're the idiots. We
Yeah,
elected these people.
Yeah.
Like Jeremy is 100% correct. If I hear one more argument, and we're not going to have time to do the justice that we wanted to and spend about securing classified information, but like I've heard so many like, well, that information is so sensitive that general population. I'm like, oh, really? I'm an American. Yeah. I'm an American citizen. This is a crime in my country. If you're going to piss on my head and tell me that Ghislaine Maxwell has to stay in jail for a crime she's committed, but you can't prove to me what crime she's committed. Yeah. Oh, well, she was trafficking children. That I'm like, well, then who is she trafficking them to? I mean, trafficking children is, you see what I'm saying?
Where's the fucking list?
Where's the list? Exactly. And to your point, Jeremy, like, like, so here we got the elections coming up in the near future, like, I don't care who it is. I don't care who you are, America, Republican or Democrat. Yep. If you're not on board with this conversation here, well, then I hate to say it, you are my enemy, right? Like if you think that it's okay to abuse children, to kill children, to mutilate children, to sexually exploit children, to traffic children, if that's your bag, if that's your thing, well, then you know what? Legally speaking, I'm going to do everything in my power to expose you and speak out against you. And if you ever come around my fucking children, well, you know what? You better not have that little pedo flag flying in your window, because you ain't coming around my kids. Plain and simple. That's just not just my kids, any child. Right. So here, Jeremy, we kind of got off tangent here, but it's a great point. I'm going to give you this one. So right now somebody's saying, oh my God, Mark just made a threat of violence. I didn't make a threat of violence. I just basically said, if I'm seeing you commit a crime, I'm going to do what every, red-blooded American by either design or by definition or by responsibility should do. Yeah. You cannot sit and allow this type of crime. Hey, if you want to sit and watch, somebody steal your neighbor's car, I might say you're kind of a dirtbag, but see, this goes into censorship and the other part of it. We're in an environment now where you're afraid to speak out. You're afraid to stand up for justice and what you know is morally right. Well, okay, great. But if I see you snooping around a school and you're trying to abduct a child, like I'm going to step in. I'm not saying I'm using violence, but I'm going like, hey, you're abducting that child. Like I have an obligation as a man, as a citizen of this country to do everything in my power to safeguard that life. Right. And I have all the legal means to do that. But to your point, Jeremy, is so right now somebody's saying, oh, there it is. This channel's already banned and kicked off, which we already are having those issues before we've even posted a video. But how is it then that somebody else from the other side of this, the other side of the spectrum of this conversation is explicitly making threats of violence, not banned, not arrested, no punishment whatsoever. So maybe that's where we kind of tied in here at the end is the two-tiered system of justice. And I mean that both in the sense of legal justice and social justice when it comes to how we use social media. Yeah. And because boys and girls, there's a reason behind that. And I think Jeremy's going to hit on this, because we're in a war. And if I can set the stage, if I can set the conditions for the terrain upon which the battle is going to be fought, and I could make it advantage me 98% of the time and disadvantage you 98% of the time, you don't think I'm going to do that? I'm not here to have a fair fight with Mike Tyson. I'm going to try to I'll probably get in trouble for saying this, so I won't say the name. I'm going to have to be that figure skater who takes the metal pipe to the opponent's, my kneecap. Because there's no way I'm beating Mike Tyson. I'm going to have to use asymmetric warfare, plain and simple. Yeah. That's what's going on.
And
Mike Tyson, I just want to, if you do watch this, Mike Tyson, please don't ever punch me. I don't want to get punched by you.
I have to clarify too, because I know that some people are like, oh, he said a strike team. Okay, well, here's the thing. Okay, here's the thing. A strike team doesn't always indicate the fact that you have to delete somebody, right? Yeah. There is nothing more than I would love to see all of those people be brought out to the public and shamed, and so people got their day to see these motherfuckers than anything else. Like, I think it's too easy to do something. If we ever get to the point to where we send a strike team to a place like Epstein's Island, please, for the love of all that is holy, bring them back and let us shame them as a nation.
Oh, that
and let
that
the
is
nation.
definitely where you do what you can to capture as opposed to kill. That's a
Right.
capture. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's like because that right there would be part and parcel of the proper handling of justice, in my opinion.
Well,
People ought to
but
remember your name for the piece of shit that you are. But as
well,
so long as we censor and we hide these, like I'm sorry, but if as a figure of governmental authority that you are refusing to release the names for this to happen, you are culpable
yes,
and
amen.
100% part of this, which means only one thing. And I don't even have to say it because you, it speaks for itself. Now, in
If it
terms,
walks like a duck and quacks like a duck, it might be a duck, you know?
well, it
Yeah, well,
and
hey, look, maybe it's not a duck, but it's a close relative. Like maybe you're not
yeah.
a pedo, but you must be guilty of something too. If you're, like, how are you not speaking out? Again, and see, boys and girls.
Would it not be harboring a fugitive
Well, I mean,
or
when
harboring a
a
criminal to some
crime is
degree?
being committed and you do nothing
Yeah,
about it, you don't report it. I know it's going to vary from state by
yeah,
state to what degree of criminality that is, but that is a crime as well, right? Like,
yeah,
oh yeah, I knew in advance that so and so was going to go do X, Y, and Z, and I
yep,
had every ability to report it to the police, and I decided not to do it. you know
yep,
so I guess here, look, I'm obviously not a lawyer, because
yep.
I don't know why I just said it that way. Well, fashion your own image of lawyers, and I hope I don't look like whatever you just imagined the lawyers. But I'm not a lawyer. But I mean, but like, so maybe it's not criminal. It's not a criminal crime, punishable under some type of
Yeah,
code in your state. But at the end of the day, in the eyes of God and your fellow man, you're a freaking DB. You're a douchebag. You
yeah,
you are a really horrible person. Like, come on. But Jeremy, but in all fairness, going back to the beginning of this, and again, the use of censorship and information warfare and all this technology is creating a class of people. And see, I think this is by design.
yeah,
Look, Yuri Bezmenov is like, a lot of people talk about him in the last year or two. Dude, that video is so old. I mean,
yeah.
Jeremy, for the record, I don't know if Jeremy and I talked about this, but dude, the people I would talk to, we were talking about this 5, 6 years
Hmm.
ago, 10 years ago. I mean, like, that's been around for a long time, and
Yeah,
it's a no-brainer. But I'm glad to see that people are becoming aware of it and starting to look
yeah,
at this. I mean, but because this is the enemy we're dealing with, and I'm bringing Bezmenov in because, to Jeremy's point, that is what we're dealing with. We're
yeah,
being subjected to forces, outside forces, again, social media,
hmm,
all these other things, and you either are going to comply, you're going to conform to what I want you to
hmm,
say and do, or I'm going to censor you, and then I'm going to, and seriously, this is one-sided. This is asymmetric warfare. Only one side's
yeah,
doing this. And if you don't go along with what I say, we're going to do everything to deplatform you from society, right? And this is the new public square in
yeah,
society. And to see elected, quote unquote, elected officials rejoicing or making gleeful comments about Tucker Carlson being removed.
yeah,
Like, okay, you can make the argument. Like, if you want to make the argument that Fox News is an independent company and they have the right to fire him. Okay, but no one's making that argument.
yeah,
All I hear is everybody's glad that Tucker's gone, and it goes to Jeremy. It goes to your point,
yeah,
because he was
yeah.
calling too much truth to justice, or you know what I'm saying. He was calling,
Right.
yeah, yeah,
Well,
truth to, what is
and
it? Power to truth, or truth to words, or whatever it is.
yep. Well, and to kind of bring in some of my closing points here. Um, one area of censorship that I really, really would like to appreciatively um, bring up, which is if you went back to 2014, when you had the whole Maidan coup, you had even left broadcasting stations or progressive broadcasting stations that were literally calling the Ukrainian government, Nazis. And
Yep.
then as soon as Russia went into Ukraine, all of that changed. And then, despite the fact that that government literally celebrated a day of a man who ushered in the Nazi regime in Ukraine, they are infallible as a government organization. And the fact that they have done everything they can to forget about the fact that they opposed the government in Ukraine to some degree, going so far as to calling groups such as the Azov Battalion is neo-Nazis, skinheads, and organizations that embrace Aryan style members, to being the saviors of Ukraine. It's awfully telling when it comes to censorship, because they don't want you to remember that. What they want you to remember is the picture that they are now painting of Ukraine, and totally flipping the script. And most people have not forgotten about that. And they get frustrated when people are like, no, they're pieces of shit. Like they really are. And the sad thing of it is that being the case, they have utilized a lot of people there that didn't need to die for the government's ambitions. And that's a whole other podcast. But the point being is, this censorship affects not only the people in the greater world, but it greatly affects people that don't want to go to the front. They don't want to die. They don't want to die for a government that is kind of destructive of its means. It's not even, in my opinion, I don't feel as if it's, a legitimate government. And I can say that in saying that at this juncture, I don't think our government is, to some degree, a legitimate form of government at this point, because it has become so destructive of its means that it's barely a shell of its former self. And so long as we continue to put shade on this subject and not tell the truth and to censor this, it's one of those things to where not only is it lying or telling a half truth in replacing a truthful point of view with something that may be less than, but it does have physical ramifications for a population, because eventually that population will march to its death. So, I mean, people deny genocides out of different places that aren't Nazi Germany or what happened to Native Americans. It's like, no, it still happens, but we don't talk about what happens in Africa. We don't talk about what happens in Asia, but it's perfectly okay to say that it only happened in 2 places in the world. And it's like, it's not how that works, so.
Well, I mean, that's a great comment at the end, because tying it in to what we're talking about here in censorship. And so boys and girls, if you're watching this video, please, share it and take the time to ponder that, because I'm just going to take Jeremy's last point and issue. It's not a challenge, you call it whatever you want.
Yeah.
Go and do your research. I mean, so Jeremy, to your point, this is, again, it's the lie by omission. A real media, which we're supposed to have. We're supposed to, First Amendment, right? We're supposed to have a real media, and we don't. We literally have become, it's Pravda. And if you look at, and then and somebody could say tinfoil hat, that's bullshit, Well, look at all the mainstream media. It's and who owns it, and all the parent company. I mean, it's like, I don't know how else to paint you a picture. And you were just being told a story, not the story. And the story we're being told is what they want you to believe. And listen, Jeremy just barely even discussed the history of Ukraine. And I would challenge you guys to go and, well, here you go, Jeremy. Like, apparently our government thinks we're all stupid, that we can't even actually do this research, or we can't have this conversation. Or if you and I watched RT, we would somehow become, like a couple out of the Americans, and we'd be raising little, sleeper cells, what?
Interesting show, by the way.
I just started rewatching it again. We should talk about that. There's some pretty cool, kind of spycraft, tradecraft things in that show that I like. But and again, it's a TV show, but they had somebody who was for real consulting them, because I'm like, well, that's not quite, but pretty good. And then and it really highlights the two different, because there's multiple ways you can conduct intelligence operations. We do things a certain way. Countries that have less F's to give about stuff will run intelligence operations another way, and that's what you see in that series. But I digress. I just want to come back to what you're saying is, like, if you take a step back and you actually, like, everyone has the right to an opinion. I would just say, okay, you tell me what your opinion is. And then, but if I present you with some historic fact, you might say, well, who writes history? I'm like, okay, great. But if I can show you 10, definitive sources that, that, for example, Cleopatra is white or was white, excuse me. I guess, that matters. There's so much historical documentation. And then, and now there's a series out there that has Cleopatra as black. I don't care about the melanin content of somebody's skin. You're born with that. You have no control over it. But why? But why are we? That would be like, okay, then why can't I make Martin Luther King white? Because their argument is like, well, what does it matter if Cleopatra is white or black? Well, then what does it matter if anyone's anything? See, this goes into the propaganda, and I'm not trying to create a racist argument here with anyone. I'm just trying to say, well, if that's your argument, well, like, what does it matter? Well, then what is it? That is my point. You've already succumbed to part of the propaganda and part of the psyop and part of the censorship and the information war. Is like, because you just said, well, what does it matter? Well, okay, well, if it doesn't matter, then why does anything matter? And that is the goal. Well, then why do your parents matter? Why does this matter? Why does, where does it stop at that point? I mean, then 2 + 2 = potato.
Yep.
Yeah, but then we might as well just solve that 2 + 2 = potato. I mean, that's exactly, I think, the path we're being driven down right now. And Jeremy, I'm looking up. We're at an hour and 10. I almost said a minute 10, like I did last time.
You did that.
An hour 10.
Did that the other day too.
Yeah. So that was kind of my final comment right there, which is, boys and girls, get out and do your own research. Everybody has a right to an opinion. I've got opinions. Jeremy has opinions. You have opinions. All I think we're trying to say is the information that you should have access to in order to form those opinions, to come up with your own cogent argument about X, Y, and Z. It has to be based in reality and not 2 + 2 = potato math, right? And that's part of the larger umbrella. And we didn't even talk about the military, which we thought was going to be the main focus. I mean, we both have a bunch of things to say about the recent events with securing classified information, that Air Force, I don't know what they call them. See, that's another thing. We can't just say soldier or now there's new names that are, well, that doesn't make any sense. Is it a boy or is it a girl? Well, we're going to come up with a neutral name so you have no idea. Well, then how can we accurately make decisions, or how can law enforcement accurately go out and hold somebody accountable if we don't, we can't even talk about skin color or, gender or stature. But this, in my opinion, and I did a bad job at the very end, and I'm going to shut up and turn it over to you, Jeremy. But that is really the thing that I see what's going on is, and this is, in my opinion, intentional. If you haven't heard of the Yuri Bezmenov videos, again, he's a KGB defector. He, back in the 70s, was on a lot of, and so here's the intel thing side of me coming through. Well, how you never really know how much you can trust a defector, right? And that'll be another podcast right there, and there's reasons for that. But if you look at Yuri Bezmenov, the videos in which he's giving interviews to American journalism during this period of time, and he's talking openly about what he was trained in and trying to promote. And if you take that and you see where we are today, you can, so he did this. Let's just say it was 1970. It wasn't, but let's just say it's 1970, and let's just say today is 2020, right? You look at that 50-year period, and you can just see everything he's saying as it's happening. You can just see these events. They're dots on the wall. All right, and that's where I'm going to end my comment here for tonight. I just want to say thanks for watching. We kind of rushed this a little bit. We'll get better at this. My final comment, and I'll turn it over to Jeremy for his comments and closing, is do your own research and go out and look at this. If you want to have an opinion, don't just make it emotional. Base it on objective facts. And when it's subjective or it's anecdotal, say so. But don't be a 2 + 2 = potato.
Right.
Jeremy.
So there's a couple different things that I would like to bring up just to kind of wrap this up. So there's a couple specific operations that I want to bring up that you probably know about, Mark. And they're relevant because I believe it was 2012, it all kind of culminated. One of them was Operation Mockingbird. The other one was Operation Northwoods. Now, why are these two things relevant? Well, they're relevant because they culminated into what I believe in 2012 was I think it was a piece of legislation that basically okayed the government to propagandize Americans. Now, why is this important? This is important because there was an anti-propaganda piece of legislation back in the day, and I'll have to find the dates, which forbid the government of using propaganda against Americans in order to formulate plots and to manipulate news stories. That's all out the window now.
One of the reasons I brought up the Obama administration as my point of intersection for this conversation. Yep,
you're nailing it.
You're nailing it, brother. Keep going.
And why is this important? Because censorship is a portion of this. In order for this to take full effect, you have to get rid of opposing views. You have to propagate a certain type of information in order to gain a desired outcome. Now, if you look at things like Operation Mockingbird, Operation Northwoods, they surround information, the use of information, and furthermore, the use of media against the American people by our government, and furthermore, by also putting forth, potential false flag events. So the media side of it is far more like Operation Mockingbird, and then Operation Northwoods was the realm of false flags. Now, this culminated, again, Mark, and you can correct me, but I believe it was a piece of legislation in 2012 that nixed the idea of like, you can't use propaganda against the American people to, we can absolutely use it against the American people. And the reason it was nixed was because it was found unconstitutional and basically morally bankrupt to do that. And now we have a government that's like, nope, yep, perfectly okay to do that. There's we have all the room and reason in the world to be able to control the narrative and manipulate what the media puts out. If that's not disturbing, and if that's not an overwhelming amount of censorship, and if that's not something that bothers you at a mental, psychological, and an intellectual level as a human being, then I don't know what to tell you, because literally they're saying it's okay to manipulate what you see, to manipulate the outcome of what you think, essentially by what you see, and basically create this fabricated narrative that does not exist. So you think that it's existing, and then if you step out of that Orwellian bubble and you're like, this is not what's going on, then what happens from there? This is crucial to the idea of censorship, because like we said, or like we discussed in the beginning, censorship and propaganda go hand in hand, albeit to their own ways. They go hand in hand. I highly, highly, highly recommend that people look this stuff up. It's out there.
In one of my slide decks on the terrorism classes, I actually have that reference, and I'll have to maybe look it up and we'll bring it up for another one, because and the other thing about it too, just like in so many, like this should be a law. No administration, no matter who's in charge, even if there's 100% consensus between both houses, and no bill, no resolution, nothing is passed on a Friday. Like the only thing, it can only be passed on a Monday or Tuesday, and it has to be debated, and none of these rushing through, but because that's exactly the what you're referencing there under Obama. That's how it happened. It was but I want to I don't want to get too far off track, and I want to give you one last little nugget to think about, going back into your great references, great pulls, by the way, buddy. Great pulls right there. Boom.
Thanks.
But just look at, I hopefully what I'm about to say will leave everyone with like a burning brain nugget. And you're like, damn it, now I got to think about this. So I'm just going to throw some things out there. Take it in the context of what Jeremy just said. I'll work from recent events, and I'll go back just a few years. Boys and girls, I'm pulling this out of the top of my head. I'm not even actually doing the research or looking at my previous notes. I'm going to start it with the Nashville shooting, right? Yep. I'm going to start right there. Why haven't we seen that? Why haven't we seen any information, many more information? Why haven't we seen that person's manifesto? Where is that? And then I'm going to go into the Pulse nightclub. Then I'm going to go into the Charlie Hebdo over in France. All right. And then I'm going to go into let's use the Las Vegas. See, I'm having a hard time. There's so many that are coming to my mind. Then let's use the Las Vegas shooting, right? Then let's also use, to Jeremy's credit, the one that we should still be in everybody's, frontal lobes, the Epstein client list.
Yeah.
You see where I'm going with all this? Like, look at how much you should know, and you have yet to receive, and when you do receive a government sanctioned or a government sponsored comment, or explanation, it doesn't pass any sniff test. You couldn't even blow your nose with that piece of paper. It's so weak. Right. So just consider that, boys and girls. We don't have the time. We're already at see, Jeremy almost said 1:19. We're almost at an hour and 20. So we'll wrap this up. But Jeremy just nailed it right there. And I'm not saying that this is a 100% CIA sponsored, and for the record, I have no knowledge, and that's not me punting and abiding by my security documents that I'm still obligated to uphold. That has nothing to do with that. If I knew of such, because I would basically say, yeah, you can make me sign anything and all day long, but if I know that you were breaking the law, violating the Constitution, getting people killed, doing illegal activities. Then that piece of paper is null and void. I have a higher moral obligation to my God, to my fellow countrymen, and to what it really means to the men and women who serve in those organizations and who really take it seriously. It isn't to some, half-ass politician who just doesn't like, going back to Jeremy's story, who doesn't like that I'm going to say something about them right now. You know what I mean? Matter of fact, last little here, I'll do a little personal story. And when I was leaving the agency, I didn't want to leave the agency. My heart was broken. I couldn't believe what I just kind of found out and seen. Like, I was so busy doing my job, I never really saw the inner machinations of that organization until I saw it. And I just couldn't believe it. And it was funny, on my way out, somebody who I don't want to say I necessarily respected, but I had no qualms with, yeah, it could have gone either way, like, yeah, okay, whatever. But that person said to me on the way out, he's like, I hope you don't find yourself down. And for those people who don't know, the Senate and the House have intelligence committees, right? That focus on intelligence. He basically said he hoped he didn't find me being an aide for a senator who was on the Senate committee for that. He was like, hey, I hope we don't, hipsy and sissy. He's like, I hope you don't find you. In other words, his fear, and I just said I kind of was neutral towards this guy, but he, at that last comment, he showed his true colors. He was like, Mark knows too much. Mark has seen the inner workings of what this really is. And we're really more concerned. We're not concerned about doing the right thing. We're concerned about preserving our budget. And to Jeremy's point, and we want to run these So that's my own last little comment on that right there, boys and girls.
So I'm going to kind of wrap this up.
Why don't you, Jeremy, we have 8 minutes until it's not 1 minute and 30, but 1 hour and 30 minutes. Why don't you take us out here? Matter of fact, I'm just going to say goodbye, everybody. I'm going to shut up. Jeremy, you do your concluding final thoughts, and then why don't you take us out, and I'll kind of follow your lead, and I'll get ready to hit end recording whenever you give us that final shout out.
So first off, just I don't know if anybody knows this, and this is really kind of a shitty plug, but I found it really interesting that John F. Kennedy's nephew is running for the presidency, Robert F. Kennedy Jr.
Yeah, you didn't know that?
No, I'm saying if I don't know if anybody knew that, because when I found out, I was like, holy crap, we're gonna have another Kennedy potentially running. Hope we all know how that went.
That doesn't end well.
Like, and the thing of it is just from what little I've seen, like, I'm not disagreeable with the guy right now. He wants to bring the military home. At any rate, I would highly at least recommend to look and see what he's about, because one, like, if you're gonna vote people, do the fucking research, for God's sakes. Like, go out there and actually research these people. Don't just like check a box.
Hope and change, Jeremy. So, boys and girls, not scripted. I didn't know he was going to talk about politics, but we were talking about this before because I was using the Obama era as the point of intersection for the conversation. But to Jeremy's point, all I heard was people say, yeah, but it's change. I'm like, what is the change? Describe it. Well, no one could. And I'm like, you do know that sometimes change is really bad, right?
Yeah.
Like,
can be
or do you just
violent as
hope
hell,
it's
dude.
not going to be bad? Yeah. So no, to your point, do your effing research.
Yeah. So again, like just a stupid, shameless little plugger in a little bit of information. And I just thought it was kind of cool because, dude, like I never in my entire life would have ever figured that we would ever see another Kennedy run.
Are you sponsored by his campaign? Is this a campaign? Is this a promotional, like, are we getting some type of like sponsorship or something here? Like, what are you doing, dude?
Yeah, by the John F. Kennedy Foundation.
Are you getting some money from this guy or what, dude? Does he owe you money? Like, I don't know. Or were you smoking crack with his kids, like, Hunter Biden, or something? I don't know. What are you doing?
But no, I just thought it was kind of interesting because, the Kennedys are a very prolific family in the United States. And I'll never forget that, one of the quotes that I think resonates with a lot of 2A people is John F. Kennedy had mentioned that this is a nation that basically needs Minutemen. We are a nation that requires Minutemen. And whether you like the guy or not, he understood the value of the individual in the right to bear arms. That being said, as we're talking about quotes, there's one quote that folds right into this. I'm not a huge fan of the guy personally, after, doing my research, which is what you should all do. But even a broken clock can be right every so often. Ronald Reagan,
twice a day.
Ronald Reagan was definitely to many degrees a broken clock based on policies. But what he was right about, and everybody knows this quote, is the most terrifying words in the English language are, I'm from the government and I'm here to help.
Yeah. That's what everybody in East Palestine, is still saying right now. They probably already making those into like banners or t-shirts.
Look, all I'm saying is the government is really good at using Americana against its own people. It's what I call it is a synthetic form of patriotism. And when I say that, it's what it is during 9/11 and after the events of 9/11, we got the Patriot Act. They made it patriotic to spy on Americans because you're doing your duty as a citizen to protect this country. And furthermore, hey, we are doing the right thing by accessing all of your private information. And if you don't go with this, you are fronting, or you agree with what happened on 9/11. They will guilt the shit out of you for that. And it's one of those things.
I want to slow you down. I hate to say this, but you're going in a direction that I want to sit and talk about now for another hour, because that same thing is coming back full circle right now. Now we got to do this, and you see terrorism. You see this language coming back into like, well, this is why we need to ban this way, because this is why we need to control your currency. Like, and for the record, and I'm on the record with anybody who knows me, I hated the Patriot Act from day one. And then the final plug here, Jeremy, to your point is, you ever notice how it's funny how every shitty fucking piece of legislation that's proposed always has some name like Protect the Children or the Patriot Act. Like whenever I see that, I'm like, oh, this is actually designed to do the exact opposite.
Again, it's using the shade of Americana and patriotism to make it this righteous thing to do. And I've never seen a righteous wolf dressed in sheep's clothing, right? Like, again, I'm from the government and I'm here to help. You should close your fucking door and walk away. Like, be like, nope, don't want any of what you're putting up. And the thing of it is there is a just form and there is a healthy form of government. But the problem of it is we've become so disenfranchised and so distanced from our role as individuals that it's gotten completely out of control. So on that, I'm going to leave it at that. There's a lot to unpack here that we will talk about in further episodes, because listen, everybody, like the reality of it is again, we have a lifetime's worth of topics to cover, but they all merit their own particular episodes. So one thing I really want to go down is I do want to further explore propaganda, but I also want to further explore the use of Americana in this faux patriotism to push through unconstitutional American antithetical legislation. And so
because they use
I would
censorship, propaganda, and in information warfare in order to do that.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I think we definitely should follow up with these episodes because it would fold so well into this course of conversation that we've had. So,
hey, brother, man, you're hitting homers. Like those are softballs over the center field. Yeah. All right, take us out. I got. All right, so, I could add to that, but I don't want to. I mean, like, actually, I wanted to sit down and talk to you offline so we can just kind of ramble for a little bit.
Yeah.
But I know you got some stuff coming up too. But hey, here's my only comment, and you take us out. Hey, everybody, I really appreciate if you're watching this video. Thank you for coming here. Share it with everybody that you know. Don't be afraid. You are not alone. It's a cheesy line from not one of the good Terminators, but it's not the worst Terminator, where he says, if you're listening to this broadcast, you are the resistance, right? Yeah. So thank you for watching. And dude, we all have to do our part. We all have to start speaking up. And if we don't stand together, e pluribus unum, if we don't start standing together, well, what comes next? I hate to say it, but we got no one to blame but ourselves. So, all right, Jeremy, take us out, brother.
Yeah. So basically, everybody, thank you for taking the time out of your busy day to come by and watch this podcast. We greatly, greatly appreciate it. And I will raise my Kalashnikov USA cup, which is, say what you want. All right. I'm a dirty Kalashnikov casual, right? So
you guys see what I have to put up with? I mean, this is what I have to deal with from this guy.
Really, like, we greatly, greatly appreciate you taking the time out of your day. And we hope to see you on the next episodes. We would love to hear your feedback. We'd love to hear your constructive opinions and your thoughts and stuff like that, because it's invaluable. One of the biggest takeaways from here is we want to create dialogue, discourse, and conversation, because that's how we grow. And hopefully, like we mentioned in our first episode, is the purpose here is to create that dialogue and then create action through it. So whether that's going out in petitioning or doing whatever it is that you have to do to affect change in your communities, your states, and your cities and stuff like that, then get out and do it. But do it at least with the confidence of knowing that you have more than one form of opinion and piece of information that you can take with you to make the best decisions you can. So on that, I hope everybody is having a great week, and I hope that you continue to have a fantastic rest of your week, a good weekend. And Mark, I think that's basically it. That wraps it up for episode 2.
I'm going to hit end recording. Thank you, everybody. We'll see you on the next episode. We're going to try to do this twice a week. Look, we're human beings, and we have lives and everything. So we're going to try, but minimum of once a week, hopefully twice a week. Right, Jeremy?
Yep, that's correct.
So there it is. We are going to peace. That'll be your thing. Peace right there, baby.
Yeah, there we go.
Okay, I agree. All right. Bye, everybody. See you on the next episode. Be safe. Jeremy, do we have to come up with a tagline? Do we have to have an outro? Do we say something like, don't get in a fight with Mike Tyson? I mean, those are words of wisdom to live by. I mean, like one thing right there.
It's hard. He hits hard.
That guy could throw a punch. All right, everybody. We'll see you on the next episode. Take care. Thanks.
See you.